One evening, two teenage elves find themselves sprinting away from our protagonist, whom they believe to be a monster. One of them activates his skills, Gringor, Fleet of Foot and Step of the Wind, to boost his speed and escape. The other, a girl who can't keep up, urges the elf boy Orntol to slow down. She's introduced as Malika, a level 9 wooden elf, but Orntol insists they need to keep running because the monster is hot on their heels. He even asks Malika if she really wants to end up as the monster's next meal. Hearing this, Malika cries out for Orntol to use one of his ranger skills to help them escape, but he laments that he's already used them all. Just when despair sets in, the system chimes in to inform him that he's gained a new skill called Flight of the Coward. The system explains that since Orntol struggles to muster courage in the face of danger, this skill will let him run like the wind while fleeing from enemies as long as he doesn't look back. Orntol sees this as a divine blessing and quickly activates the skill. Grabbing Malika's hand tightly, he takes off like a shot, declaring that he needs to warn the villagers. The monster chasing them, seeing their incredible speed, gives up with a sigh. Once they reach the village, Orntol shouts for the villagers to raise the alarm, explaining that the humans have returned, and upon hearing this, panic spreads like wildfire. Some villagers scramble to their homes, while the news is so alarming that the village council quickly convenes to determine if Orntol's claims hold any truth. They note that his scream was loud enough to wake the dead. The village elder points out that if Orntol's report is indeed accurate, then Ritter must take action. Ritter tries to clarify that according to Orntol, the human in question is quite young and poses no real threat. However, the elder counters that they've already witnessed how rapidly humans can level up, making even a young human potentially dangerous. He recalls that 6 years ago, humans ignited a war with 6 different nations over something as trivial as a border dispute. The elder explains that the humans' insatiable desire for leveling knew no bounds, and they would have taken over the world if it weren't for the alliance of other races, elves, merfolk, harpies, dwarves, Jellin, and dragonkin, who banded together to stop them. The longer the humans fought, the faster their leveling speed increased, driven by an addiction that led them to madness. This cycle continued until the humans ultimately sealed their own fate with their last act of vengeance, known as the Cataclysm, which obliterated them from existence. Since then, no humans have been seen in the world until now. The elder insists that this is why they need Ritter to handle the situation. Ritter, a level 48 elf ranger known as the Flash in the Dark, is their best hope. The elder adds that Kira and Menta, two of the village's high-ranking rangers, are out on patrol, so they need Ritter to investigate and take the necessary steps. Ritter, on the other hand, grits his teeth. He confesses that after everything that went down in the war, after all the lives lost, he's not sure if he still has the fight left in him. One of the elders reassures him that the pain of their past is something they all carry, and it's not easy to forget, but he's still the only elite ranger in the village at the moment. Hearing this, Ritter feels a surge of emotion. Though a bit hesitant, he accepts the mission, telling the council he'll take care of the human. A little while later, Ritter and his team are crouched behind some bushes, watching our protagonist. It's the first time they've seen a human, and some of the elves are a bit taken aback. But Ritter quickly activates his identification skill, which works like an appraisal, revealing our protagonist's status window. Aside from being level 4, the system indicates that he's quite lonely, and his leveling speed is marked as mild. To Ritter and the other elves, our protagonist seems like a beast, especially with that massive sword and the fact that he just took down a monster. Drawing his bow and arrow, Ritter vows to end this as painlessly as possible. He activates his power shot skill and applies a piercing arrow enhancement, boosting the arrow's speed and power. He silently prays that whatever gods watch over humans will welcome our boy into their gentle embrace. But just as the arrow is about to hit, our protagonist dodges it effortlessly. The sheer force of the arrow creates a massive hole in a nearby tree. Ritter can hardly believe his eyes. Even at level 4, our protagonist is quick enough to evade his attack. They unleash a flurry of arrows at him, and to their astonishment, he weaves through them, dodging every single one except for one that strikes him in the leg. Seizing the moment, Ritter lunges at our boy with his sword, but the first strike is blocked effortlessly by our protagonist. They began exchanging blows, with our hero parrying every attack and forcing Ritter onto the defensive. As Ritter struggled to fend off the strikes, our protagonist finally asked if he could understand him, but before anything could be clarified, Ritter ordered his team to fall back. In the blink of an eye, a massive mutated bear came crashing in, sending both of them flying. The system identified this creature as the Lord of the Forest, an ancient beast that had long ruled the food chain but had now become infected. The bear started tossing everyone around, and just when it seemed like it would end one of the rangers' lives, Ritter sprang into action. He managed to stab the bear, but his sword got stuck in its tough hide. As the bear turned its attention to him, Ritter had to retreat, leaving his weapon behind. Seeing this, the bear lunged at him, pinning him to the ground. Just when it looked like the bear would finish him off, our protagonist intervened, delivering a powerful strike to the bear's head and killing it instantly. the massive creature collapsed, and our protagonist, who already looked quite fearsome, became even more intimidating, as the system confirmed his victory over the ancient bear, causing his level to soar from 4 to 8, his entire being radiated with newfound power. When Ritter used appraisal on him again, he could hardly believe his eyes. Our protagonist's leveling speed had jumped to moderate. This triggered some PTSD for Ritter, reminding him of the war 6 years ago, especially the rapid leveling of humans. Turning to Ritter, our protagonist asked why he had tried to kill him, especially since he hadn't done anything to provoke them. It felt just like everything else in this godforsaken world. Under the influence of his leveling obsession, he raised his sword, already calculating how many levels he could gain from taking down a level 48 elf warrior, especially after that massive bear had boosted him by 4 levels. But let's hit the rewind button and go back a week to see how our protagonist ended up in this predicament. Just a week ago, our main character was living it up in high school, hanging out with his best buddy Jason. Now Jason is your classic jock, super popular and always trying to drag Rob, our protagonist, into the fun, like attending parties and just enjoying life a bit more. But Rob feels like people only like him because he's friends with Jason. One day, as they were wandering the halls chatting about the warm November weather and climate change, Rob shared that Jason has been his best friend since kindergarten, always looking out for him and trying to coax him out of his shell. But Rob is quite fond of his shell, claiming it's cozy and smells like pizza. Their chill moment took a turn when Rob's expression suddenly froze, as if he'd seen a ghost. A dark, shadowy door appeared right in front of them. Jason, who was leading the way, didn't notice at first and joked that Rob's scared face was just because he spotted their gym teacher. But when Jason turned around, he was just as shocked. Other students were already bolting for the exits, and Rob knew he had to act fast to save Jason. He grabbed his friend and urged him to run, but then one of the students tripped, and the shadowy door unleashed some eerie energy that reached out to grab them. Jason, being the good guy he is, decided to stop and help the fallen student. Watching this unfold, Rob felt paralyzed. He had always seen himself as an observer, not a hero, but the mysterious door seemed to sense an opportunity and shot out dark energy to snatch Jason. Before Jason could get far, one of the tendrils caught his leg and started dragging him back. Jason called out to Rob, saying he couldn't move. Even though Rob had always thought of himself as just a bystander, this time he stepped up to save his best friend. Just then, a chain shot out from the mysterious door, aiming to restrain Jason's hand, but Rob jumped in to protect him, and the chain ended up latching onto his own arm. Before he knew it, he was being pulled toward the door. Jason reached out, calling his name, but Rob was already too far gone to be saved. As he entered the dark door, he shouted for help, only to find himself trapped in a shadowy cube. A mysterious voice analyzed him and ominously declared that he would do for now. Rob found himself waking up in a cave, and the first thought that crossed his mind was whether he was actually dead. He told himself not to go towards the light, but as he stepped out of the cave, he realized he was very much alive, which was a relief. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling of confusion about where he was. As he approached a nearby cliff, he was left in awe. The view was straight out of a fantasy novel. The trees were vibrant and colorful, and he spotted some flying creatures that looked like dinosaurs. His heart raced with fear as he realized he was far from campus. Panic set in as he thought about how to get back to Jason, and he worried if his friend was okay. Then it hit him. He was wearing some bizarre clothes, like something out of a fantasy story, complete with boots. To top it off, there was a sword strapped to his back. Curiosity got the better of him, and he pulled it out to test it. Just brushing his finger against the blade made him wince. It was ridiculously sharp. Suddenly a system window popped up, informing him that he had lost 1 heath point. He stared at it, poking it with his hand, trying to figure out what was going on. Then another massive system window appeared, displaying his status information. Rob was labeled as a level 1 human, and there was even a section where he could input his pronouns, which felt a bit odd in this fantasy setting, but he figured it couldn't hurt. Alongside the usual HP 109 out of 110 and stamina at 90, there was a status area that indicated Rob was very confused. Inwardly, he wondered if this was some kind of advanced VR experience. As he looked closer, he noticed other details like endurance and vitality, and he couldn't help but think this whole situation resembled an RPG. He even had a passive skill called speed reading. Grabbing his head, Rob started muttering to himself. Surprisingly, he was staying pretty calm about everything, not freaking out just yet. But then, as if on cue, the reality of the situation hit him, and he began to panic. It was a delayed reaction, but now he was definitely freaking out. But as Rob wrestled with his emotions, an infected wolf suddenly approached him. The system chimed in, almost tauntingly, revealing that this was a level 8 frenzied wolf, much stronger than the average wolf from Rob's homeworld. He needed to be careful, but instead of backing down, Rob pulled out his sword, cursing under his breath, and wondering how on earth one was supposed to use a sword. he pointed it at the wolf, warning it to stay back. With his eyes squeezed shut, he began swinging the sword wildly, hoping to hit something, anything before the wolf even got close. The wolf, taken aback by his reckless flailing, leaped at him, aiming to take his head off. Still with his eyes closed, Rob instinctively aimed his sword upward, and to his surprise, it pierced straight through the wolf's abdomen. But the infected creature didn't seem to care. It acted as if it couldn't feel pain at all. It lunged at Rob's shoulder, tearing into him. Fueled by adrenaline and pain, Rob slashed his sword upward from within the wolf's body, splitting it in two. It looked pretty cool, but as the wolf's body hit the ground, Rob collapsed as well. The system immediately notified him that he had lost 5 HP, then 9 HP, and it kept counting down. But Rob was too focused on the pain to pay attention. As his HP continued to drop 10, then 15, he finally realized this wasn't some advanced VR game, he was actually bleeding out. The system even mocked him, labeling his status as severely bleeding out. Rob's health was plummeting at an alarming rate. As he leaned against a nearby tree, a wave of disbelief washed over him. Was this really happening, or was he trapped in some kind of nightmare? He wished he could just wake up in the comfort of his warm bed, but when he glanced at his blood-soaked hand, reality hit him hard. This was no dream, and he was pretty sure he was dying. That stupid wolf had torn a chunk out of his shoulder, and he needed to stop the bleeding fast. In a panic, he tore his shirt and wrapped it around the wound, but his health continued to drop. Exhaustion set in, and with the blood still flowing, hope began to slip away. He thought to himself that he had never been hurt like this before, and felt utterly lost. Frantically, he tried to recall anything from school, especially biology class, that might help him, but he realized he had barely paid attention during those lessons. Frustrated, he remembered that Jason's mom was a nurse. What would she do in this situation? He could almost picture her in his mind, but he knew he needed to elevate his injury to slow the bleeding. Thanking Jason's mom in his thoughts, he lay down on his side, keeping the wounded shoulder facing up, but it wasn't working. His health points kept dwindling. Cursing his luck, he wondered if this was how he was going to die. Anger bubbled up inside him as he cursed the person who had thrown him into this world, literally tossing him to the wolves. But he refused to accept his fate. Determined, he got up, vowing not to go down without a fight. He shouted to the sky, declaring that whoever was responsible for bringing him here would pay, and he would make them open a portal to send him home. Just as his health points continued to drop, the body of the infected wolf he had killed began to dissolve, and at that moment, the system finally confirmed that our boy Rob had taken down the frenzied wolf. After that, it informed him that he had leveled up to level 2 and earned 5 stat points. His whole body started to tremble, almost as if he was overwhelmed with power. The system noted that since this was his first level up, he received those 5 new stat points, along with a rare active skill called Do Not Go Gently. This skill was granted because he had just survived a near-death experience, showcasing an unyielding will to live. When his HP drops below 25%, he can activate this skill, which will double his vitality and enhance the effectiveness of all defense and vitality-based skills for a minute. After this, Rob decided to allocate all his unassigned points to vitality, which led him to gain another skill, a passive one called Tough Skin. This skill reduces the physical damage he takes by 10%. He also received another passive skill, Regeneration, which heals him by restoring 10% of his max HP every hour. As Rob lay on the ground, his mind began to wander, and some memories started to resurface. He recalled the good times he had with Jason, where they would talk about how to make the most of their high school years. As they strolled down memory lane, Rob grabbed Jason's shoulder, telling him that he knew this was just a dream, but he was genuinely happy to see him again. He even mentioned how he couldn't wait to meet him in real life, promising to find a way back home. But then Jason grinned and said that even if Rob made it back, he wouldn't see him again. After all, he was dead. Rob was left in utter shock. Jason looked him straight in the eye and confirmed that he was really gone 6 feet under. He added that Rob didn't really think he had saved him back then, did he? Rob, still in disbelief, struggled to grasp what was happening, insisting this was just a dream. Jason pointed out that since Rob hadn't witnessed the aftermath of what had happened, he didn't know the whole story. He might have actually died or been dragged into this strange world with him. Rob argued that this couldn't be real since it was just a dream, but Jason insisted that all of this could have happened. Frustrated, Rob shouted that this nonsense needed to stop invading his mind. It seemed like the supreme being who brought him to this world was toying with him psychologically, using Jason as a pawn. Jason called Rob a sad little puppy, and the supreme being questioned whether Rob really thought Jason was his friend, considering they had met when they were young and had no standards. Using Jason's body, the supreme being tore off the necklace that symbolized their friendship, telling Rob that Jason was never his friend to begin with. Dark energy began to emanate from Jason's body, heading straight for Rob and lashing onto his injured shoulder. As the dark energy consumed him, He woke up in terror, wondering if it had all been a nightmare, but he quickly noticed that the wound on his shoulder had stopped hurting. When he removed the cloth, he was thrilled to see it completely healed, which made him really happy. He excitedly declared that this world was truly different. How could a wound like that heal up without even leaving a mark? As he glanced at the wolf he had killed, now just a puddle of blood, he felt relieved that he hadn't ended up like it. Even though it was just a gross pile of sludge now, he couldn't help but stare at it, questioning whether this was a result of his actions, but it was so disgusting that he decided he needed to get out of there. Before he could leave though, he ended up vomiting from the sight. He wondered if his day could get any worse, and just then the sky darkened as rain began to pour. He realized that his situation could always take a turn for the worse. The system window popped up, showing that his new skill, regeneration, was active, and his health points were slowly increasing. It was a slow process, but at least he was on the mend. He ducked into a cave, drenched from the rain, and with his shirt torn, he was still getting soaked. Inside the cave, Rob started pacing around, glancing at his status window. He figured that leveling up had granted him a bunch of new skills. Then he spotted one of his new skills, Fast Learner. It was a bonus passive skill. As he looked at it, Rob couldn't help but wonder if this was some kind of cosmic joke. Whoever was running this world clearly had a knack for Earth references. His status window was looking a bit better now, with his HP at 208 out of 210. He pondered whether he'd have to nearly die again just to snag some more skills. But he shook off that thought, reminding himself that he had to make the most of whatever he got to survive in this fantasy realm. The system also notified him that he could activate his Do Not Go Gently skill again, since the cooldown had ended. After doing so, Rob questioned if that would be enough to keep him alive. He also wondered if hitting 0 HP would mean game over for him. Given his gut feeling that whoever tossed him into this world didn't include a restart button, he figured it was best not to test that theory. The forest around him was crawling with mutated monsters, and he was pretty sure even the rabbits were no exception. With the rain pouring down, he felt hungry and cold. He started to shiver, regretting that he had quit Boy Scouts before they taught him how to make a fire, which would really come in handy right about now. As he checked his pocket, he found a note. Opening it, he was immediately filled with rage. Someone was definitely messing with him. The note, written by the person responsible for bringing him here, simply said, "Good luck," which only fueled his anger even more. In another part of this world, known as Ixatan, two elf warriors found themselves in a fierce battle against a swarm of spider monsters. The female elf Kira is a level 27 warrior, while her companion Menta is a level 25 warrior who the system dubs the best support character anyone could hope for. Menta shouts to Kira, expressing his concern about the overwhelming number of monsters they're facing. Kira nods in agreement, realizing that with just the two of them, they won't last long. They start to flee, the horde of monsters hot on their heels. Kira urges Menta to stick close, warning him that splitting up would be a death sentence, especially in a dungeon like this one. Menta, wide-eyed, can't believe what he's seeing. He thought this was supposed to be a beginner dungeon. Kira explains that this isn't the first dungeon to appear near the village since the scouring. Menta questions how Kira thought they could handle such a challenge, but she confidently states that as a warrior she's built for this kind of fight, just like Menta, who is a ranger. They both fought on the front lines during the war. Just as Menta tries to argue that their levels are too low, Kira pulls him aside, and they hide behind a wall to escape the pursuing monsters. Menta wishes they could level up faster to take on these creatures, but Kira reminds him that there's only one type of being that levels up quickly in this world, and they're far worse than anything in this dungeon: humans. She adds that it's thanks to their god that they no longer exist in this realm. Meanwhile, back to our boy Rob. He was still feeling pretty down about that letter tucked away in his pocket. He couldn't help but wonder how some jerk could toss him into such a dangerous world and then just say good luck. But pushing those thoughts aside, he figured that as long as he stayed alive, he'd find a way back home. As he got to his feet, the system chimed in, letting him know that for surviving a near-death experience and getting his health back up over half, he'd earned a point in vitality. Hearing this, Rob couldn't help but smile. Finally, something worth celebrating. But before he could really enjoy the moment, his stomach growled. He was starving, so he set off through the forest, thinking his first priority was to find food and water, and second, to rack up some more experience points. He reasoned that the more he leveled up, the easier it would be to survive. Pumping himself up, he shouted that it was time to get moving. After a few hours of wandering, Rob stumbled upon some frogs. The first thing he did was raise his sword, ready to take them out. He muttered that he didn't want to do this, but he went ahead and killed one of the poor frogs, earning himself 1 experience point. This was exactly why humans were feared in this world. They'd do anything to farm experience points. Rob then started chasing the remaining frogs, but suddenly tripped over a small rock and landed face first in the water. As he got up, his eyes lit up with joy. He had found clean drinking water. He declared he wouldn't go thirsty again. After enjoying the pond for a bit, he continued exploring the forest, shouting for the portal and saying he was ready to go home now. He looked under a rock, hoping the portal might be hiding there, but all he found was a creepy-looking fish. As he kept wandering around, he checked his status window and learned that MP stood for magic. He even wondered if he could do magic now that the system had listed MP in his stats, so he decides to give it a shot with a chain bow, but nothing happens. Spotting another frog, he goes ahead and slaughters it, gaining yet another experience point. Thinking this might change things, he tries his magic again on a branch, commanding the leaf to move, but again nothing happens. Frustrated, he gives up and decides to munch on some fruit instead, but his stomach is still growling, and frog stomping isn't making much of a dent in his XP. Deep down, he starts to think he's nowhere near leveling up. He really needs to find something bigger than frogs to farm. Out of nowhere, Rob hears a squeaking sound and turns to investigate. To his surprise, it's just a bird. He throws a rock at it, but the bird flutters away. Feeling defeated, Rob decides to get back to slaying some frogs. After taking down a whole dozen, he starts to feel a bit guilty, calling it a massacre. He even admits to feeling like a jerk. But hey, at least he racked up a decent amount of experience points. The system chimes in, letting him know he's unlocked a new passive skill, swordsmanship. It explains that the more he swings his sword, the better he'll get at it. Rob can hardly believe it. He's never even held a sword before, yet here he is, gaining skills just by whacking frogs. But despite his newfound talent, he's still in the same predicament, starving and not leveling up, no matter how many frogs he takes out. Suddenly, he hears that squeaky sound again. Looking around, he feels a rush of joy, exclaiming that he's found the Holy Grail. But it turns out this Holy Grail is just a squirrel. He raises his sword, thinking that if he lets it fly true, this little guy will push him over the top in XP. However, upon closer inspection, he realizes the squirrel is infected. The system confirms it's a level 3 frenzied squirrel, and just to tease Rob, it adds that the squirrel is about to go nuts. Before he knows it, the squirrel leaps at him, catching him off guard. Rob reacts on instinct and smacks the squirrel right in the face with his hand. The impact sends the poor creature crashing into a nearby tree, and it dies instantly. Grossed out by the blood splatter on his hand, Rob can't help but stare at it in disgust. But then the system chimes in again, telling him he's earned 10 XP for defeating the frenzied squirrel. Suddenly, his face lights up with excitement as he finally levels up to level 3. The system informs him he's gained 5 stat points, and with a wicked grin he can't help but feel a little proud of his progress. He starts mocking the dead squirrel, acting like he's on a high. Every time he levels up, he seems to get a little more unhinged. But being the high school idiot that he is, Rob can't help but laugh at the squirrel's lifeless body, calling it weak. Honestly, it's pretty funny. The system, ever so observant, noted that our boy, whose watchful eye has become even more vigilant, earned himself a point in perception. He also picked up a new passive skill called foraging. To gain this skill, he had to spend several hours searching for food and water in the wild, which now gives him an instinctive knack for locating sustenance when he's out there. Alongside that, he received the hunting skill, which essentially does the same thing. As Rob walked away, he was blissfully unaware of a squirrel perched high in a tree watching him closely. It seemed to be plotting revenge for its fallen comrade. Suddenly, the infected squirrel leaped down and attacked Rob, its sharp fangs sinking into his head, catching him completely off guard. He yelled, frantically trying to dislodge the squirrel, and after a few tense seconds, he managed to fling it away. But to his dismay, the squirrel took off after him. Rob found himself at the edge of a cliff with nowhere to escape. As he halted just in time to avoid falling, he glanced down and realized that in this fantasy world, guardrails were a luxury that didn't exist. Before he could process it, the squirrel charged at him, knocking him over the edge. Rob screamed in terror as he plummeted, but luck was on his side. He managed to grab hold of a tree root hanging nearby, leaving the unfortunate squirrel to fall on its own. Rob, who was quite muscular, perhaps due to his rapid leveling, looked down and realized he needed to climb back up quickly. Yet as he hung there, he couldn't help but reflect on his situation. His parents had no idea where he was, and it had already been 2 whole days since he was transported to this world. Soon, 2 days would turn into a week, and a week into a month. He couldn't help but wonder if Jason would tell his parents what had happened to him. But knowing how crazy it would sound, he questioned whether they would even believe him. He also pondered if he would ever see them again. It was tough for him to grasp what might happen next. Would he even be the same person when he returned? Tears welled up in his eyes as he wrestled with the thought of giving up, but he gave himself a little pep talk, reminding himself that he couldn't throw in the towel, not now at least. He vowed to be brave, and as he pulled out his sword, he began to use it to climb back up, declaring that one way or another he was going to make it home. Seeing this, the system notified him that he had gained a passive skill in climbing. It explained that this skill would help him tap into his latent monkey DNA, improving his climbing abilities overall. After reaching the top, The system added that he had also acquired a skill called deep breathing, which allowed Rob to restore 1 point of stamina with every deep breath or 2 normal breaths he took. Finally, at the top, he noticed his climbing skill level had increased from 1 to 2. Feeling helpless and hopeless, the system rewarded him for his quick reflexes that saved him from a poor decision, granting him 1 point in dexterity. Rob took a moment to catch his breath, thinking that this world seemed intent on killing him, but as he looked at the setting sun, he couldn't help but acknowledge its beauty. A wave of sadness washed over him as he thought about how much Jason would have loved to see this stunning scenery. He promised himself that one day he would tell Jason and his family all about it. Noticing his sorrow, the system informs him that he has gained a rare skill called melancholy resistance, which helps him bounce back more quickly. However, Rob immediately tells the system to stop. He explains that he doesn't want to lose this feeling, clutching his head and insisting he doesn't want to become numb to human emotions. Seeing his distress, the system deactivates the skill, leaving Rob sobbing as he mourns Jason and his family. Honestly, what's going on with Rob and Jason? It seems like he's been missing him way too much, and it's starting to raise some eyebrows. Rob's acting a bit suspicious, but let's keep going. At the same time, not too far from where Rob was, Orntol and Malika were trying their luck at catching some fish in the river. Malika teased Orntol, saying he wouldn't catch anything with just his bare hands. She suggested he might as well try shooting at them with his arrows, but Orntol shrugged it off, claiming there was no need to rush since the day was so lovely. Lying on the grass, Malika agreed, saying the forest felt peaceful today and that she loved it being elves and all. It made sense. Meanwhile, back to our protagonist Rob. He couldn't help but express his disdain for the forest. He was currently battling another infected wolf that was dead set on taking him down. With a powerful slash of his sword, he sent the wolf flying, managing to break its lower jaw. Pointing his sword at the zombified creature, Rob apologized, saying he was sorry for the pent-up aggression he was about to unleash on it. But the wolf, looking even angrier, began to growl at him. To Rob's surprise, the wolf's jaw healed almost instantly, leaving even the system in shock. This was a level 8 wolf, and the system mocked Rob, asking if he hadn't just severed its mouth. Rob admitted that at this point nothing surprised him anymore. He pointed his sword at the wolf, and as it lunged at him, he reacted quickly, driving his sword into its stomach. However, the wolf managed to scratch his face with its sharp claws, causing Rob to drop his sword in frustration as he punched the creature in anger. Seeing the infected wolf getting back up again, Rob couldn't help but wonder if this wolf had some kind of fantasy rabies. He raised his fist, ready for another round, as the wolf lunged at him again. Rob landed a solid punch to the wolf's face, and they began exchanging blows. Was he imagining things, or was this wolf actually blocking his punches with its paw? But Rob managed to land another powerful punch, sending the wolf flying once more. This time, he didn't give it a chance to recover. He twisted his sword, which was already embedded in the wolf's stomach, and ended its life in an instant. Almost immediately, he felt a rush as the system confirmed that he had slain the frenzied wolf, and leveled up to level 3. He also gained 5 stat points, and was awarded a new passive skill called Brawling. The system explained that to earn this skill, one must engage in unarmed combat. It added that he would now be more adept at using humanity's oldest weapon, throwing hands. Other skills like hunting, swordsmanship, and brawling also saw an increase in rank. As Rob's injuries began to heal, he couldn't help but smile. He thought it was a bit strange to admit, but that fight had actually been pretty fun. As he walked away, the system displayed his status window. Most of his stats were looking good, with vitality being the highest, and he had 5 unassigned points. Rob started to ponder what to do with those unused points. He decided to invest 2 points into vitality, thinking that if it hit 30, he might unlock a new skill. After adding the points, the system notified him that his regeneration skill had leveled up to level 2, now healing 20% of his total max HP every hour. However, Rob wasn't entirely satisfied. He had hoped for a bigger percentage. Next, Rob decided to add 1 point to his mind, leaving him with 2 unused points. By doing this, he gained the active skill Quick Thinking, which slightly boosts his speed of thought but drains 3 stamina points per second while it's active. Plus, it can be mentally exhausting if used for too long. Hearing this, Rob couldn't help but smile. He felt this was a skill truly worth having. In a burst of excitement, he shouted for the wolves to come at him, hoping they wouldn't be the infected ones this time. He started slashing the water around with his leg, feeling happy and thinking about how he could finally enjoy some good food. That's when he spotted Orntol and Malika by the same river. To Rob, this was incredible. He felt a rush of joy since they were the first people he had seen since arriving in this world. He immediately used appraisal on them, and the system revealed their status windows, but it classified their state as terrified and highly confused. Rob tried to introduce himself, but Orntol quickly grabbed Malika's hand and shouted for her to run. Rob waved his hand, trying to get them to come back. He couldn't understand why the elves had run away. Letting out a sigh, he lamented his situation. After a whole damn week, the first people he encounters bolt away. Feeling lonely, he began calling out to anyone, wolves and elves alike, but there was no response. Sitting down, he thought about how nice it would be to talk to someone. Unbeknownst to him, Riordan and his team of rangers were already surrounding him. Rob continued calling out to the system, asking for a skill that would amplify his voice, but the system remained silent. He decided to head back to his cave, and as he walked, he couldn't help but comment on how hungry he was. Meanwhile, Riordan and his team were watching him, curious about how this encounter would unfold from Rob's perspective. As Rob was still trying to wrap his head around why everything in this world seems to melt away after getting killed, Riordan unleashed a high-speed arrow aimed right at him. It was pure luck that he managed to dodge it. He slipped on a rock, and somehow losing his balance helped him evade Riordan's shot. The arrow was so powerful that it left a massive hole in a nearby tree, leaving Rob in a state of shock and terror. Riordan and his team of rangers then began raining arrows down on Rob, forcing him to flee in fear. He couldn't comprehend who was shooting at him out of nowhere, but just as he was trying to escape, an arrow struck his leg, piercing straight through his thigh. Panic surged through him as he felt the sheer pain and horror of having an arrow embedded in his body. Before he could gather himself, Riordan lunged at him, ready to strike with his sword, but by some stroke of luck, or maybe adrenaline, Rob managed to block the attack. He started swinging his sword wildly, and surprisingly, he countered Riordan's strikes. However, one of Riordan's attacks came dangerously close to decapitating him. In a moment of desperation, he used his Identify skill on Riordan, discovering that he was a level 48 elf ranger hell-bent on killing him. Fear washed over Rob as he shouted for Riordan to stop attacking if he could understand him. Just as Riordan's sword was about to slice through Rob's neck, they both noticed a massive infected bear charging toward them. As the bear lunged to attack, the system revealed that it was known as the Lord of the Forest, an ancient creature that had ruled the food chain for years. Now a level 42 infected monster, it sent Rob flying, causing him to hit his head against a tree. As he began to lose consciousness, he urged himself to focus and think of a way out of this dire situation. Meanwhile, Riordan and the Lord of the Forest were locked in a fierce battle. Rob couldn't believe what was happening. He realized that if the bear won, it would eat him, and if the elf ranger triumphed, he would still be killed. Thinking strategically, Rob couldn't help but wonder how much XP he would gain if he managed to take down the bear. He figured it would be enough to help him defend himself against Mr. Level 48 Riordan. With sheer determination, Rob got to his feet, convinced that leveling up meant he had to kill that bear. Spotting an opportunity when the bear had Riordan pinned to the ground, he stealthily approached from behind and leaped at the bear, driving his sword straight through its skull and killing it instantly. Rob was suddenly hit with a flurry of system notifications, letting him know he had leveled up to level 8 and earned 5 stat points with each level. The system also mentioned that for pulling off a move that was frankly suicidal, where just a hint of inaccuracy could have meant certain death, Rob gained 1 point in dexterity. Plus, for taking down an enemy way out of his league, he snagged another point in dexterity and 1 point in endurance. Just like that, the system confirmed that Rob had defeated the massive frenzied ancient bear. A smile crept across his face. He was feeling euphoric again, and maybe a little unhinged. He even mused that sometimes the only good thing about this world was leveling up. Without hesitation, he poured all 20 of his stat points into Vitality, boosting his regeneration skill to level 4. Now it healed 40% of his max HP every hour, and he also unlocked a new skill called Life Surge, which rapidly restored 30% of his max HP with a 24-hour cooldown. With this newfound power, Rob turned his attention to Riordan. When Riordan used Identify on him again, he was left speechless by the sheer difference in Rob's stats compared to before. Looking down at Riordan, who was trembling in fear, Rob declared that since they were the ones who had tried to kill him first, they should be ready for the consequences. He pointed out that he hadn't done anything to the elves, yet they had attacked him just like everything else in this cursed forest. With his sword raised, he reasoned that since he had gained 4 levels from defeating the bear, taking down a level 48 elf ranger should earn him even more. Riordan desperately tried to plead with him to stop, but Rob couldn't understand the elf's language. Just as he was about to strike, he hesitated, bringing his sword dangerously close to Riordan's face. Trembling, he realized the weight of what he was about to do, and reassured himself that he hadn't completely lost his way. Grabbing his head in frustration, he struggled to comprehend his actions. This world had pushed him to the brink of killing someone just for the sake of leveling up. Rob turned and walked deeper into the forest, reminding himself that he was still the same Rob. Meanwhile, Riordan was left bewildered by the whole situation. The system displayed his status window, and even though Rob's overall stats had skyrocketed, he felt a deep sense of sadness and loneliness. As Rob kept walking, he felt his hand trembling. Inside, he was grappling with what had just happened. He had nearly taken a life. He tried to convince himself that he wouldn't have actually gone through with it, but doubt lingered. Lost in thought as he wandered through the forest, he almost stumbled into a massive hole. Staring down into it, he couldn't shake the feeling that it resembled a haunted house, or maybe more like a haunted hole. Peering closer, Rob knew he should turn back, but a part of him wondered if the portal that had brought him to this strange world might be down there. After all, when he was sucked into the portal, it had been in a dark place just like this. Yet the thought of descending into that abyss terrified him. Memories of how he had been dragged into this world flashed through his mind. Closing his eyes, he urged himself to stay strong and not let fear take over. He reminded himself that he would have to confront this if he ever wanted to return home. So he began to climb down the rope ladder, telling himself to think of good things like his mother and the smell of banana bread on a Friday night with Jason at the bowling alley. But just as he was getting into it, the rope ladder snapped and he fell. To his surprise, it wasn't a long drop. As he lay on the ground, he couldn't help but think that this kind of fall would have definitely killed him back when he was still at level 1. Maybe he was starting to get the hang of this world after all. As Rob sat up, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was a good sign. Nothing had tried to eat him yet. Suddenly, he heard a voice calling for someone named Menta. Turning his head, he realized someone was in trouble up ahead. Being the good guy he was, Rob took off running toward the sound, shouting for them to hold on. As he got closer, he noticed a light ahead and soon found himself standing in front of a massive door glowing with red energy, reminiscent of a boss room in a video game. When he opened the door, horror washed over him as he saw a body brutally killed by monsters. The poor guy's chest was torn open. Looking closer, Rob realized it was an elf, or what was left of one at least. Panic set in as he approached the elf's body. The thought that he had almost done something like this to someone else earlier haunted him. He found himself apologizing to the lifeless form in front of him, not even sure why he felt the need to say sorry. Tears streamed down his face as he murmured that no one deserved to die like this. He wondered if elves had some sort of last rites for their dead. He even started asking the deceased elf if he preferred to be buried, cremated, or something else entirely, but of course there was no response. Rob continued talking to the dead elf, mentioning that he had met living elves, and for some reason this one seemed to have better conversation skills than the ones who were alive. As he extended his hand to close the poor guy's eyes, he thought about how this elf didn't look like he had died recently, meaning he wasn't the one who had screamed earlier. Unbeknownst to Rob, someone was approaching him from behind. Before he could react, a sword was pressed against his neck, and a voice warned him not to move or he'd lose his head. Terrified, Rob immediately raised his hands in surrender, even asking if the person spoke English. But as he glanced at the female elf, tears began to fall from her eyes as she took in the scene. As she mourned her fallen friend, whom she called Menta, in a fit of rage she swung her sword at Rob, accusing him of being the one responsible for Menta's death. Rob barely managed to dodge the attack by leaping aside, his heart racing as he wondered why everyone in this world seemed so incredibly strong. But before he could gather his thoughts, the female elf seized him by the neck effortlessly, demanding to know what Menta had done to deserve such a fate. Seeing the terror in Rob's eyes, she insisted on an answer, or she would kill him. Rob could only choke out that she was already doing just that by strangling him, but she slammed him to the ground instead. Her eyes were filled with tears, mourning her friend's death as she pressed him for answers. In desperation, Rob decided to use his appraisal skill on himself to show her his system panel. When the panel appeared before her, she realized that Rob was only level 8, which meant he couldn't possibly have killed Menta. Reluctantly, she released him, and Rob quickly explained that when he arrived, her friend was already dead. She simply told him to leave, then collapsed beside Menta's lifeless body, grieving his loss. It dawned on Rob that the person who had called for help earlier was her. He hesitated, wondering if he should just slip away while the elf girl started blaming herself, insisting it was all her fault and that she should have paid more attention to him. She even began praying to their god, pleading not to take Menta away from her, revealing that Menta was the only one in the elf village who treated her like a true friend. She promised to bring his body home so his soul could finally find peace. As she covered Menta's body, Rob called out, offering to help her, but she shot him a glare and started hurling insults. She accused Rob of being a weak, disgusting creature who couldn't save anyone. Understanding the pain she was in, Rob just went along with it, acknowledging her words. He added that for some reason, everyone in this world seemed to think he was a monster, and maybe they were right, but right now he just wanted to help her get her friend home. Though the elf girl hesitated, she eventually agreed, but not without shouting at Rob not to get any ideas about friendship. She was just letting him assist her. Rob nodded, assuring her he understood. Reaching out his hand, he finally introduced himself as Rob, and the elf girl introduced herself as Kira. She was cute in her own way. With that, the system noted that Rob had gained the passive skill Diplomacy, enhancing his negotiation skills by boosting his mind by 20 points. This would help him diffuse tense situations using words and body language. The system even mentioned that given Rob's personality, this might be the skill he needed the most right now. Not too long after, Rob and Kira were hauling Menta's body on a makeshift carrier, making their way back toward the dungeon exit. Rob couldn't help but ask why the dungeon felt so enormous. He didn't remember it being this vast when he first entered. Kira explained that dungeons tend to shift over time, though she admitted that was just something she had heard. This led Rob to wonder if it was Kira's first time in a dungeon, just like him. She confirmed it, adding that dungeons aren't exactly close to their village thanks to their god Lothran. Rob then bluntly asked why she had decided to stroll in there without a solid plan. He had a point. Menta's death was kind of on her, but in Kira's defense she said she just wanted to be useful to their village, especially since they often reminded her otherwise. Rob chimed in saying he understood what it felt like to be an outsider. He was actually a pretty decent guy. When Kira teased him about trying to empathize with her, a human no less, Rob didn't shy away from it. He asked if there was something wrong with that, noting that she was the first person he had formally met in this world. He explained that the first people he encountered all ran away, and the second ones tried to kill him. It had gotten so bad and lonely this week that he even started talking to a stick. Kira playfully reminded him that she had also tried to kill him too. Rob insisted they had moved past that, but Kira suggested he should consider it on hold until they actually made it out of the dungeon. As they continued their small talk, Rob soon stepped in some strange purple goo on the floor. When he asked what it might be, Kira shot back, asking if he was sure he was actually human. Rob, confused, asked what she meant by that. As they bent down to inspect the goo, Kira explained that according to the stories from their village, humans are often seen as a rather unforgiving race. She added that the feeling is mutual, as they too struggle to forgive humans for their past actions. Rob, being new to this world, was puzzled by what Kira was talking about, leaving her in disbelief that he was unaware of humanity's misdeeds. He quickly clarified that he was new to all of this, and had only encountered one human himself. This prompted Kira to wonder if that meant he had no knowledge of the Great Scouring or the Great Cataclysm that had occurred in Ixaton, the name of their world, which I think I mentioned earlier. But our clueless boy, in his typical fashion, insisted that Kira was just tossing random words at him. Kira tried to clarify that Ixaton was the name of their world, but as she gestured around them, Rob mistakenly thought she was referring to the dungeon they were in. Realizing how oblivious he was, she called him a Rafa Berry and explained that Ixaton was actually the name of the region they were in. Rob, marveling at the fact that this world had a name, then asked what a Rafa Berry was. Kira informed him that it was a mildly poisonous berry found in the forest. Excitedly, Rob pointed out that he had eaten one of those in the woods, to which Kira simply remarked that he was strange. She didn't realize that Rob was from another world, so things that seemed like common knowledge to her were completely foreign to him. Curious, she asked where he was from, sensing he didn't belong in this world. Rob replied that he was from a place called Earth. Kira, having never heard of such a place, was taken aback when he explained that it wasn't a city or region, but a planet. This revelation left her utterly dumbfounded. Rob then inquired if it was common for people to just drop down from the sky after being dragged by chains through a mysterious portal, or if he's just the unlucky one. Hearing this, Kira asks if that means Rob didn't grow up in Elatra, the name of this world. It turns out I was mistaken earlier when I said this world was called Ixaton, but that's okay. Rob confirms he didn't grow up here, but he adds that it's nice to finally know the name of this place. Kira then starts to explain the implications of that, but pauses to ask if our main character really has no connection to the humans who once lived here. Rob confirms that he doesn't, and Kira admits that hearing this eases her worries, even if just a little. She then asks him why he came to the dungeon, and Rob simply replies that he came to face his fears. That's true, considering that for the past 2 weeks in this world, it feels like everything has been trying to kill him in one way or another. Kira then asks if Rob really came to the dungeon to level up. Not knowing what that means, Rob responds that judging by Kira's tone, it sounds like a bad thing. Kira stops and tells him to pull up his status window, adding that it's an order, not a request, which is pretty amusing. Rob, playing along, agrees, saying he'd do anything to keep Kira's sword in its scabbard. He quickly pulls up his status window, and as Kira checks it out, Rob playfully warns her not to judge him too harshly since he's a bit of a weakling. Kira lets out a sigh of relief, saying thankfully his leveling high is still low, which is a good thing. Rob starts to wonder what this elf girl is talking about. He's never noticed anything by that name in his status window. He wonders if Kira is referring to the addictive feeling he gets every time he levels up. He immediately asks what would happen if his leveling high gets any higher than it already is, but Kira just tells him she would kill him on the spot. Noticing how serious she is, Rob couldn't help but promise to keep it in mind. As they continued walking, Kira asked Rob if he knew he could allocate his points to areas other than just vitality. Little did they know, a swarm of mutated spiders was lurking right above them. Rob expressed his fear of dying, especially since the forest was crawling with wolves, poisonous berries, and even a massive bear, but before they knew it, the spiders were right on top of them. Kira suddenly noticed something and told Rob to be quiet. She asked if he could hear that unsettling sound, but before he could respond, one of the giant spiders dropped down right in front of him. Kira urged him not to move, which only made Rob more anxious. In a swift motion, she swatted the massive spider away, killing it instantly. When they turned around, they were shocked to see an entire army of these spiders. Panic set in for Rob as he quickly used his appraisal skill on them, discovering they were baby dungeon spiders, all very peckish and hungry. Most were level 3, but there were also some massive ones at level 6, acting like protective big brothers to the little ones. Soon enough, Rob and Kira found themselves completely surrounded. With nowhere to run, Rob's panic escalated. One spider, sensing his fear, leaped toward him, causing him to jump in fright. But Kira was quick, slicing it in half and telling Rob they had to fight. Still trembling, Rob hesitated, saying he wasn't sure if this was the right moment to mention it, but he really didn't like spiders. In fact, he hated them, just like Indiana Jones hates snakes. Kira raised an eyebrow, wondering what on earth he was talking about. Rob, being his usual self, tried to explain that Indiana Jones is a character from a movie, even mentioning that the guy has a pretty great theme song, which is actually spot on. Anyway, Kira quickly tells him they'll have to fight their way out of this mess, since she can't handle this many spiders on her own. Surprisingly, they're turning into quite the team. Even though Rob is still terrified, he pulls out his sword to face the spiders closing in on them. When he spots a spider getting way too close to his head, Kira swiftly slices it in half, warning him to watch out, especially from above. Then she starts unleashing some flashy moves using her Circle of Death skill, which costs her 40 MP, but allows her to take out a bunch of spiders at once. In no time, she's already taken down 20 of them and is steadily reducing their numbers, crushing some with her hands, and even throwing her sword, which turns out to be pretty effective. Before long, she's actually enjoying herself, smiling as she rains down on the unfortunate spiders. Activating her Circle of Death skill again, she delivers an impressive swing that wipes out most of the remaining spiders in an instant. She starts leveling up, hitting level 28 and gaining 5 stat points. Soon, she begins to wonder where Rob has disappeared to. Looking around, she spots him struggling, completely covered in spiders. But Rob isn't a pushover either. He starts swinging his sword like a madman. Kira even wonders if he's lost control of his emotions. Just then, while she was distracted, a sneaky spider began creeping down toward her, but our hero Rob swooped in to save her just in the nick of time. I love how she stood there in a daze, probably thinking that he might have accidentally taken her head off. Anyway, she thanked him for the rescue, but soon realized that our MC was completely focused, taking out spiders like there was no tomorrow. This made Kira question whether the stories they heard as kids about humans being savage were actually true. Meanwhile, we get a glimpse into Rob's mind. He's freaking out and even tearing up, wondering why there are so many spiders around. Just to add to his panic, one spider lands on him and starts biting as if it's trying to eat him alive, which only makes Rob more anxious. The system chimes in, letting him know that his poison resistance has gone up from level 1 to 2. In contrast, Kira was handling the spiders much more effectively with her sword, while Rob was losing it. Honestly, I can't blame him. Being surrounded by so many spiders, especially with some biting him, is terrifying. As the spiders kept biting, his poison resistance climbed to level 3. But that wasn't the end of it. These spiders were practically bullying him at this point. Tiny spiders swarmed all over him, and soon he was covered in them. So Rob made a smart move and rolled on the ground, which ended up killing most of the spiders that were attacking him. The system confirmed that he had gained a new passive skill called Creepy Crawler Crusher, which helps him take out at least 10 insects, bugs, or arachnids, and even gives him a moment of intense hatred for all things creepy crawly. Of course, the system couldn't resist throwing some shade, suggesting that Rob might have the most intense phobia of all. Seeing this, Rob just stares at the system with a tense look, making it clear that his skill is actually active. One little spider that somehow managed to survive tries to attack him, but he crushes it instantly with his hand. Just like that, his Creepy Crawler Crusher skill levels up to level 2. Rob keeps on squashing spiders with his leg and some with his sword, which bumps his Creepy Crawler skill up to level 3. The skill even transforms into a rare one called Arachnophobia, which now takes out 50 pesky insects, bugs, or arachnids. The system chimes in, saying this skill will make our boy despise all creepy crawlers, but spiders will be at the top of his hate list. He'll deal 50% extra damage to anything that skitters and a whopping 250% extra damage to spiders. Hearing this, our boy starts to smile like he's on cloud 9, and his level begins to rise. He's now at level 9 and has gained 5 stat points. The system even mentions that for pioneering a new exercise routine called Never Stop Sprinting, Swinging, or Screaming, he's earned 1 point in endurance. Calling out to Kira, Rob asks if they're really winning this fight, since his fear of spiders is escalating. But then he suddenly notices the spiders targeting Menta's body and rushes to stop them, calling them assholes and saying they should show some respect for the dead. He starts slicing them down with his sword, but for some reason the more he kills, the crazier he gets. This is the effect of his leveling obsession. As soon as he hits level 10, he gains another 5 stat points. And since he's taking out spiders with both his sword and hands, his brawling skill reaches level 3. He keeps on killing, and by the time Kira notices him, she immediately gets a bad feeling, especially when she caught sight of that creepy grin on Rob's face as his life surge skill kicked in. It was quite the skill. Not only did it heal Rob completely, but it even cleaned him up in the process. Kira quickly pointed her sword at Rob, demanding to know if he was still in control of his emotions or if she needed to put him out of his misery. Rob, snapping back to his usual self, was confused by her words, but soon realized how humans were perceived in this world. Awkwardly, he reassured Kira that he definitely wasn't craving blood, though a warm meal would be nice. With the spider threat now behind them, Kira covered Menta's body. But in the midst of it all, they failed to notice a creepy little worm slithering into Menta's corpse. Kira suggested they get out of the dungeon first. After a while, they finally emerged from the dungeon and set about grilling some fish over a fire as the sun dipped below the horizon. Rob, thrilled to finally have something decent to eat after 2 long weeks, couldn't help but comment on how he could eat fish like this every day. Kira, who was busy checking Rob's status window, pointed out that it was a miracle he had survived this long, considering he had been eating nothing but poison. She noted that Rob's leveling obsession was still only at a mild level, which surprised her since she expected it to be at least moderate after taking down a bunch of spiders in the dungeon. But Rob shrugged, admitting he didn't really understand what any of that meant. All he knew was that the fish in his mouth was the best he had ever tasted in his life, which was saying something since he came from a civilized 21st century world. Kira told him to think of the fish as a token of her gratitude, explaining that getting Menta's body out of the dungeon without Rob's help would have been impossible. But Rob insists that he should be the one thanking Kira since she's the one who rescued him from the dungeon. He adds that even the forest isn't any safer, as he's been attacked by monsters and some really creepy-looking squirrels. Kira clarifies that those unsettling creatures are called the infected. She mentions that they don't really understand the magic behind this infection, but it's been spreading among the wildlife in the forest, creating all sorts of abominations. Hearing this, Rob realizes that must be why every creature he's encountered in this forest has tried to attack him, even the small ones. He adds that he's ready to leave this forest whenever Kira is. At this point, Kira takes a deep breath and tells him it's the right moment to reveal that everyone in her village, and honestly, everyone in this world, wants him dead and buried. This catches Rob off guard since he hasn't done anything wrong. He mentions that he's already met some elves, a level 48 elf to be exact. Kira just smiles and tells Rob that he should clean himself up first. She can't just introduce him to the village looking like a wild lunatic. I love how this story shows real character development, but let's keep going. As they carry Menta's body to the elven village, Rob asks Kira how she and Menta became friends. Kira shares that when they were kids, she and Menta used to steal bread from a local bakery, always getting into trouble. She adds that her childhood memories aren't the best, but Menta was the bright spot in almost all of them because he genuinely looked out for her. Rob expresses his condolences for her loss, and Kira continues, saying that their village has its issues, but it's still home. Soon they reach the entrance to the elven village, and Rob quickly points out how eerily quiet it is, suggesting that the elves must be turning in early for the night. But Kira has a different take. She notes that even the candlelight meant to guard the gate is missing, which definitely raises some red flags. Then we get this adorable bonus panel of Rob earlier, taking a bath while a spider crawls all over him. Classic. But back to the story. Kira activates her Step of the Wind skill to pick up her pace, and as she dashes through the village, it hits her. Everyone is holed up inside their homes, clearly frightened. She starts to worry that the infection might have spread throughout the village. She makes a beeline for Riordan's house and bangs on the door. After a bit, Riordan finally opens up, his leg still injured from his earlier tussle with Rob. Kira immediately asks about his leg, and he explains that his regeneration skill is lagging because he's exhausted. He promises to fill her in later, but urges her to share the important news she seems eager to discuss. Before that though, he asks about Menta, and that's when Kira breaks the news that Menta didn't make it. Tears welling up, she explains that they went to scout a nearby dungeon, got separated, and by the time she found him, it was already too late. Hearing this, Riordan comforts her, saying that may their goddess Lothran welcome Menta into her gentle embrace. He asks Kira to lead him to Menta's body, and as they walk, he explains that they were attacked by the Lord of the Forest, not far from the village. This means the infection in the animals is becoming more aggressive with each passing day. Kira adds that now it all makes sense why the village is on lockdown. But just as they're about to go further, Kira mentions that she had some help bringing Menta's body home. When Riordan asks who assisted her, she reveals it was a human. This news doesn't sit well with Riordan, and he quickly reminds Kira that they were tracking a human earlier that day, one who was both skilled and dangerous. Kira insists that without the human's help, she wouldn't have been able to retrieve Menta's body, and they wouldn't even be able to perform his final burial rites. She urges Riordan to meet Rob and have a chat, assuring him that Rob isn't the monster everyone thinks he is. Surprisingly, Riordan agrees, but he warns that if the human poses any threat to the village, he won't hesitate to take him down. Kira nods in agreement, fully aware that Rob isn't who they believe him to be, but she adds that this human isn't from their world. Meanwhile, Rob realizes he's in deep trouble when he sees Kira returning with Mr. Level 48. Kira tries to introduce them, but Rob cuts in, saying he and Mr. Level 48 have already met, which Riordan confirms. At this point, Rob understands that this guy can actually speak English, or at least something close to it. Riordan explains that the language Rob was using is called Common. Rob then asks if Riordan understood everything he said back in the forest, to which Riordan confirms, meaning this guy was ignoring him on purpose. Rob can't help but think that chatting with this Mr. Level 48 feels like talking to a brick wall. He extends his hand to greet Riordan, expressing how glad he is to meet again under better circumstances. But Riordan flat out rejects the handshake, leaving Rob puzzled about what's eating at this guy. He urges Riordan to at least make an effort to ease the tension, especially since life has been a real struggle lately. And honestly, he's right. Our guy is lost, scared, and nearly met his end in another world. On top of that, he's still trying to figure out how things work here. He likens surviving in this world to solving a crossword puzzle without any clues. Getting real, he tells Riordan that he genuinely needs some help. He even acknowledges the tension between elves and humans, but insists that it's not his issue. It's amusing how Rob casually throws around terms like beef in a fantasy setting. Anyway, Rob continues, saying that if Riordan isn't willing to help, he could at least point him toward the nearest human settlement, and he'll be out of their hair in no time. Hearing this, Riordan finally realizes that our main character is truly not from this world. Kira chimes in, explaining that there are no human settlements around. Actually, there are none at all in this world. As far as they know, our MC is the only human left. This revelation catches Rob off guard. As they stroll around, he presses them for answers about what happened to the humans. Although it's clear this is a touchy subject for both Riordan and Kira, Riordan explains that war is what happened. He adds that the war was so devastating that the victories were never worth the cost. Honestly, the humans had to go. They went completely mad with power. All they could think about was leveling up and chasing that euphoric high that came with it. They slaughtered the elves, including children and anyone else who crossed their path, even their own friends and fellow humans. It's true, I'm sure if even half of you were thrown into this world, you'd be out there killing everything just to snag those sweet experience points. Riordan explains that all the gravestones Rob sees represent thousands of lives lost that day. Rob asks if he's talking about 1,000 dead humans, but Riordan, getting defensive, clarifies that it was 1,000 elves killed by humans. Rob is taken aback, asking if humans really did something like that, but Riordan, trying to guilt-trip him, insists that the violence from humans was endless. He goes on to explain that in the end, all the other races, elves, dragonkin, dwarves, merfolk, harpies, and even Jellin, banded together to take down the humans. The war later became known as the War of the Six Nations, but by the end it was so horrific that they renamed it the Scouring. What else could you call the near extinction of an entire race? The elf population was halved, and it wasn't just soldiers, it included everyone from children to the elderly. Yeah, the humans had to go. The craziest part? The humans basically lost because their own weapons malfunctioned and blew up in their faces, even though they were winning the war. Anyway, as they approach the statue of their hero, Riordan adds that what remained after the war was a shattered world in ruins. He asks if our main character has anything to say after hearing all this, but Rob just replies that he needs time to process it all since it doesn't feel real yet. Deep down, he thinks that the humans back on Earth did something pretty similar. Riordan shares that during the war, even though the elves managed to survive, they didn't come out unscathed. He feels like they lost a part of themselves in the process. He describes it as a decade of relentless fighting, to the point where he just wanted to curl up in a corner and let the worms take him. All he has to show for that war is a metal prosthetic arm. In a fit of anger, he lashes out at our boy Rob, accusing him of taking away his livelihood. Rob tries to explain that he wasn't even there, but Riordan keeps insisting that the humans have rendered half of his ranger skills useless, since he can't even dual-wield properly with his prosthetic hand. Seeing Riordan getting out of control, Kira steps in and tells him to calm down, suggesting that he should save the rest for later. This leaves Rob in complete shock, wondering how there could possibly be more after everything he just heard. Reardon insists he has to tell Rob everything: the crimes, the children, the humans slaughtered, but Kira cuts him off, saying that's enough for now, and that they all need some rest. Reluctantly, Reardon storms off, still angry, telling Rob to take Kira's advice and get some sleep, since tomorrow is a big day. Rob asks what's happening tomorrow, and Reardon claims that our boy will be presented before the elders for judgment. He adds that based on what he's told Rob about the humans, he should already know what kind of judgment awaits him. Reardon offers Rob another option. He can leave the elf village right now and never look back. He says he'll at least give him that choice as a sign of mercy. Kira stands there, looking at Rob with sad eyes. Then we get this adorable little extra panel of Rob trying to imitate the stance of the elf statue, and Kira just looks at him like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? Before I wrap up, I want to give a heartfelt thanks and a big shout out to my very first channel member. Thank you for being the first to support this channel. And just like that, we've come to the end of today's story. If you're still with me, drop the word strawberry cake in the comments. It's a little nod for those who stuck around till the very end. A simple like goes a long way in helping this channel grow, and subscribing means you won't miss out on the next chapter. Thanks again, and be sure to check out this one next.